Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the TRISTEL PLC preliminary results investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors online will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform, and we'll notify you when they're ready for your review. Before we begin, for those online, we'd like to submit the following poll, and if you give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company will be most appreciative. I'd now like to hand over to CEO Paul Swinney. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I recognise everybody in the room, which is lovely to see you all again. I think we've got something like 100 people calling in remotely. So I'll just start with a few. Let me introduce my co-presenter, Liz Dixon, our CFO, all of you, who you all know very, very well over many years. But let me start with a few opening remarks about the company to describe what we do for those who maybe have dialed in but aren't familiar with us. We're a specialist infection prevention company. Everything we do, our technology, all of our efforts and energies are directed at controlling the transmission of microbes and pathogenic, dangerous microbes within hospitals to keep patients and staff safe and from hospital-acquired infections. So that is what we do exclusively. As I say in that opening remark, our exclusive focus is the hospital, and we have a proprietary chlorine dioxide chemistry, which is our technology. It's unique to ourselves in the way that we make the chlorine dioxide work, and it's a very powerful and very effective biocide. By biocide, I mean something that kills microbes. We have a global footprint, and much of today's discussion, I'm sure, will center around our efforts to enter the North American market, which we have now done. So we have two brands, two product portfolios. One is branded TRISTEL, and those products are used to disinfect medical devices that are used for diagnostic purposes in and around the body. We're not involved in surgical instrumentation and the sterilization thereof. We're involved in diagnostic instrumentation, by which I would include ultrasound scanners, transducers and probes, and then endoscopic equipment and devices used in ophthalmology coming into contact with the eye. And our second brand, named CASH, is intended, again, using chlorine dioxide, intended for the disinfection of surfaces within hospitals, which would include bed mattresses, tabletops, floors indeed, and those are our target areas. We have a simple, focused business, and ours is a global opportunity. So these are our preliminary results for the year ended 30th of June, and as always, the way we like to do this, I'll turn over to Liz to run us through the numbers.
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, everybody. Okay, so our financial highlights for the year ending 30 June 2022. We're reporting a flat year in terms of revenue. We have made some discontinuations of products during this financial year, and that's something we'll cover as we go through the presentation. But if we look at the continuing business, then we're reporting 3% growth year on year. Our business is global, as Paul says, and our overseas business continued to grow up very slightly by 2% in the year. And our overseas business represents 65% of total sales now. And that's important to us because we were a UK originated business, and we've wanted to de-risk our reliance upon the NHS, upon the UK for some number of years. So one of our key strategic objectives is to grow the business internationally. And now our overseas business represents 65% of the total. Our gross margin remains steady at 79%, down very slightly, principally just rounding amount to 79% from 80 last year, and adjusted EBITDA margin of 24%. And when we talk about adjusted, we have adjusted back share-based payments, as we always do, and also as a result of the discontinuation programs, we had an impairment of intangibles in the year of 2.4 million, which related to those products which we have now ceased to make and sell. Adjusted pre-tax profit of 4.5 million, in line with brokers' expectations, and with the reported pre-tax profit of 1.5 million. Adjusted EPS 8.4 pence per share, and our dividend per share for the year will be 9.55 pence in total. That includes a 3p special dividend that was paid in August. And our dividend policy, which historically was 2 times cover, we have deviated from to maintain the value of the dividend that we're paying out. So 6.55 pence was paid last year, paid again this year, and we will stay at that level until we can re-establish growth in our dividend by returning to the 2 times cover policy. And we're hoping very much that that will happen in the 22-23 financial year. Our final dividend will be 3.93 pence, and that will be payable on the 16th of December. We are reporting a net cash balance of 8.9 million at 30th of June. Since that date, we've paid out our special dividend, which amounted to 1.4 million. And today, cash in the bank is 9.2 million. So we've jumped back up after paying out that dividend, which is testament to the strong first half that we have had.
Some of the operational highlights of the year, a key feature of the year ended 30th of June was the discontinuation during the first half of products that were not based upon chlorine dioxide chemistry and were not focused upon the hospital. We considered them to be non-core. There were 2 markets that they addressed. One was the veterinary marketplace under the brand Anistel, and the other was the life sciences and pharmaceutical manufacturing sector under the brand TRISTEL. Products were in slow chronic decline, and so COVID acted as a catalyst for us as a management team to take a decisive initiative to bring our involvement with those products to an end, which we did very determinedly during the first half and wrapped it all up during the year. The next 3 points relate to North America. In June of this year, 4 months ago, we finally made our de novo submission to the United States Food and Drug Administration. After a 5-year project that involved an investment of some £3 million and the generation of huge amounts of data, a lot of groundbreaking science with respect to disinfectant chemistry, culminating, as I say, in a submission to the FDA. For what we describe in our industry as a high-level disinfectant, semi-critical medical devices, very specifically ultrasound probes that enter the body vaginally or rectally. So they're invasive devices and need high-level disinfection, and it is the FDA that has jurisdiction over high-level disinfectants in the United States. The submission was extensive. It was run to many hundreds of pages. It underwent a successful completeness check by the agency, and then they completed their review a couple of weeks back, and as a consequence of completing that review, provided us with a detailed, pretty extensive request for supplemental additional information, clarification on many points. A lot of the data they wanted clarification, some challenges as to the methods that we had used to generate that data, and we are now in the process of discussing and negotiating with the FDA to really do understand with our advisors what they want and the detail of the protocols and methodologies that they want us to employ, and then we will go off and get that additional data generated through microbiological testing, various other types of study. We have until March to submit the supplemental data, and then their clock starts again. The clock will take us to just before the end of June next year, and we will have a decision by the FDA. Nothing that they have presented us with causes us any great concern. It's well within our gift to generate the responses that they're looking for. It's important that there is no ambiguity about what we do, because we have to get it all done within the 180-day period. But we're confident that we will, and we have to remain confident that we'll get a successful outcome from the FDA. And we will have then an approved high-level disinfectant for use in the United States, and we will be the third disinfectant approved by the agency in over a decade. So we would have very high hopes for the commercial success of the product with that approval. Now, having said that, the same product in essence has been approved by the EPA and has been launched. So 3 congresses in the end of September, all addressing ultrasound, general ultrasound in obstetrics and gynecology, and that was the Association of Sonographers, the United States Association of Sonographers. A conference involving clinicians involved in emergency medicine. Ultrasound is widely used in emergency medicine and A&E departments. There was a different city at the same time, a congress for those professionals, and a third congress in yet another city that was for those clinicians that are involved in vascular access. Ultrasound is widely used in catheterization patients, putting a line into a part of the body, and a lot of instances, ultrasound will be used to guide the line into the vein, so you don't have to repeatedly stab a poor patient to get the line in. So there was a multitude of uses of ultrasound, and these were 3 of the clinical groupings that we will be selling to as we go forward in the United States. So we've launched with our EPA-approved product, Duo. You could regard this as a soft market introduction with a view to gaining brand awareness, getting the product into our distribution network in the States, which has been established with our partner, Parker Laboratories, all in preparation for the FDA launch later next year. Or indeed, we may well find that this product approved by the EPA as an intermediate level disinfectant and not a high level disinfectant will in its own right be very successful. And that would be our hope. And finally, in Canada, we have an approval from the Canadian regulatory body, Canada Health, for Duo. Once again, exactly the same product format with a different indication for use, which is for ophthalmic devices. And we've signed up with the country's leading ophthalmic distributor, a company called Innova Medical Ophthalmics. They're a specialist in the ophthalmic arena. They represent some of the leading manufacturers worldwide. Hargstride, a Swiss company, and they represent that Hargstride in Canada. And we are launched in Canada as well. So we said for many a year that we will establish a business in North America, and we're here today, and we can say we have.
Okay, so over the course of the last 17 years, we can show here our growth track record, which displays growth since IPO in 2005 to 2019, the pre-pandemic year, with a compound annual growth rate of 18%. Then we hit the 3 turbulent years where the combination of Brexit, COVID, and then our self-imposed rationalisation of our product range have caused our revenue to jump about. So those 3 disruptions consisted of Brexit, which is where we saw the NHS supply chain acquire £900,000 of product back in 2021. They've set it aside, ready to protect against any disruptions to supply, and then they released it into their supply chain in the first half of the year we're reporting upon. So we had a year-on-year adjustment or year-on-year disturbance of 1.8 million from 21 to 22. COVID had the initial impact of an increase of our revenue as surface disinfectants and also medical device disinfectants were in high demand in that first 3 or 4 months of the pandemic. And that was followed by, in 2021 and also 2022, the waves of COVID closing down hospital outpatient departments, which meant that the number of diagnostic procedures fell, and so the use of our medical device disinfectants fell as well. And then the third impact, the rationalisation, as Paul has spoken to a little bit, as a consequence of the stresses upon our manufacturing and back office support of the business during those previous 2 years, in conjunction with a fall in revenue and certainly margins under a lot of pressure, we made the decision to discontinue our Cristel and Anistel ranges, to curtail and cull all of those one-off products, specific active substances that fall outside of what we consider to be core, so that we could start to peel away the distortions of them and focus our business on what's truly relevant and important to us, which is chlorine dioxide products sold into the hospital market. So looking at the next slide, this is one that we have included in our presentations for the last 3.5 years, and it just shows quarter on quarter the impact of some of these external influences. So the first COVID wave, we saw the reduction in medical device sales, but a big jump up in our cash surface range. There was a recovery over the following 2 quarters. Then the second wave of COVID hit, a better recovery, a faster recovery, not quite such a negative impact upon our business. And then the Omicron wave in last winter, which had another dent to revenue for medical devices, but nevertheless a less impact. So what we're seeing is that our market, the hospitals into which we sell, are coping better and better with COVID. So while we speak of the impact of COVID receding, we mean for us. COVID, of course, will continue to be a feature of our lives. There will be waves every winter, I'm sure, for decades to come. But what we are experiencing is that the hospitals into which we sell are coping with that and not having to stop the diagnostic procedures that we're interested in, to the extent that we have these significant impacts upon revenue. And then we show in here the first quarter of financial year 2023, so July to September just passed. Here we can finally show growth that's bouncing back, partly because of the impact of Brexit on the comparable period, but also that we can now report our sales teams around the world are managing to find their way back into hospitals. They're getting face-to-face meetings. They're being invited in to talk to infection prevention heads, and we are now building our sales in terms of volume and finally booking new business again. So the rationalisation project, I won't go into a lot of detail because I think it's been spoken to already, and I hope it's relatively clear why we've done this. When we discontinued products that were non-core, which we mean non-chlorine dioxide, non-hospital, and by culling the number of SKUs by almost 50%, we've freed up resource, space, we've freed up people, and our growth drivers are now there for us to focus upon, which is chlorine dioxide and hospital. We completed the rationalisation during the year. It did contribute £1.5 million to revenue in these numbers, but it did not make any profit contribution because we had wrap-up costs, we had a couple of redundancies and some stock write-offs. So as a consequence, profit is not been increased as a consequence of those that £1.5 million of sales. But we did have the impairment of intangibles of £2.4 million. And then the next slide just shows, I think, the key reason for us. It actually puts numbers, if you like, to those discontinued products. So in blue, you can see at the top of the graph, these are the discontinued, the product contribution from those items that have been discontinued over the course of the last 4 years. If we had not been making and selling those products, then we would have been reporting in this period 3% growth on the continuing products. If we look now at purely medical devices without alone, then we can see that medical devices grew by 6%. And if we add back that Brexit distortion of 1.8 million between the 2 years, then the underlying growth in medical devices was 14%. And then, as I say, in the quarter just past, then all products contributed a 20% growth period on period. So the rationalisations refocused us back onto what is core to us, and it will have a positive impact upon sales growth rates.
We wanted to share with you what we consider to be the main tailwinds and headwinds that we're facing. There's no doubt, it shows through in the numbers in the first quarter, that hospitals are returning to the service levels that they were at pre-COVID. We have 14 subsidiaries covering more than 14 countries, but with 14 subsidiaries throughout Western and Central Europe, Hong Kong, China, Italy, Singapore, Malaysia, and Australasia. And all of our colleagues report that hospitals are busier than they were over the course of the last couple of years. My personal opinion is that they're nowhere near as busy yet as they will become as there's more normalisation over the course of the coming 6 months, 12 months into the future, which augurs well for us in terms of beating forecasts, which I think there's a possibility of. So diagnostic procedures are increasing, but waiting lists here in the United Kingdom, and it's mirrored elsewhere in all the other countries we operate, they are very significant, and the hospital systems are having to invest to try and bring them down. With respect to our cash surface disinfectants, I think the legacy of COVID, when there was pretty much indiscriminate use of disinfectants to disinfect absolutely everything. We can all remember having to disinfect our baskets when we went into the local supermarket. The ridiculous waste of chemistry and money, but still, that's what we were all told we had to do. But I think it was held true in hospitals as well. There was indiscriminate use of disinfectants throughout these institutions. It's come to an end, and I think it's left infection prevention teams all around the world looking for the best disinfectants to deploy. And we are one of the best disinfectants that is available to hospitals for surface disinfection. And our investment in the cash product range enables those products to be very easily used and deployed. And the third point is very relevant to our future. They've been the method by which the cash is delivered separates the disinfectant liquid from the spreader that is used to distribute and spread the liquid around a surface, be that a bed mattress or a tabletop. All around the world, the disinfection of those surfaces is carried out by pre-wetted plastic wipes. And by separating the disinfectant liquid, we enable the hospital to use pulp or paper-based towels that are available everywhere to spread the liquid around. And there's a reason why plastic is used in those pre-wetted, pre-impregnated wipes. It's because the wiper, the spreader, has to coexist with the disinfectant for as long as the shelf life and use life of the product. And plastic is a fantastic material for that because it's inert. If you had a paper towel inside a flow wrap of wipes and the liquid would be added to the paper towel, by the time it got to you and you opened the flow wrap and took the towel out, it would be mush. So there's very good reason why all of these wipes that get used in the home and in hospital are made of plastic. But by separating the disinfectant, which actually does the job, from the spreader, which pushes it around the surface, you can use paper towel. And all hospitals are under enormous pressure to reduce their carbon footprint, to reduce waste, and the throwaway element of these convenience products, which are pre-wetted plastic wipes, is something that we can play our part in eliminating. I'm sure it's uppermost in everybody's mind, what is the impact of inflationary environment on our business? And we feel that we're reasonably well insulated from it. First of all, we have very high margin products. Secondly, the use of energy in our manufacturing process is pretty low, relatively speaking. To give you a number, in the past we paid £7,000 a month in electricity. It's only because we're coming to the city today that I know that figure, because I was tidy, I wouldn't know this ordinarily. Now apparently the monthly cost is £12,000. So our business, like our household bills, are being impacted by what's going on in the energy markets. And importantly, we have pricing power. We have a unique product. If a hospital wants to use a high-level disinfectant applied manually in a foam form, there's only one product that is available to all hospitals worldwide, and that's a TRISTEL product, be it Duo or Trio or any of the other products of that format that we manufacture and sell. So we are unique, and unique means can translate into sensible pricing power, which we are judiciously exercising. In the forecast that was put out this morning by our analysts, there's a 3 million revenue growth from 31 million to 34 million pounds this financial year that we're in now. 80% of that is volume, 20% of that is price. And that equates to a 2% price increase, which in the current environment doesn't sound at all appropriate. Well, in actual fact, we have mandated all of our teams around the world to increase prices by between 6 and 8%. It's not something in our business we can just do overnight, but it is being implemented. And in the first quarter, the increase in revenue on the prior period last year, there's a 4% price increase embedded in that. And over the course of the balance of the year, as these price increases are adopted and implemented, that percentage will increase. So we do have pricing power, we exercise it judiciously, but we have to pass on some of these input costs to our customers, which is being accepted. There are always some negatives. I think the biggest problem for hospitals returning to the level of service that they should be at is staff shortages. We read about it in our press, but it's true in all the countries we operate in worldwide. Getting qualified staff is a real problem within hospitals. And who knows what will happen with COVID. As Liz has said, I think hospitals are better equipped. The calamitous situation 2 years ago is probably not going to repeat. So we feel reasonably comfortable around COVID going into the future.
Absolutely. Okay, so for the past 6 years, we have had in place financial targets so that we can, aside of our broker and our analysts, we can tell you what it is that we're targeting ourselves with in terms of growth. And for the first 3 years, we achieved our targets, overachieved our targets. For the second 3, which ended in June this year, we missed them as a consequence of the disturbances that we've spoken about so far. And so we're resetting the targets again. They're actually the same. We will aim to attain more than 10 to 15% per annum as an annual average in sales growth over the course of 3 years. And we will aim to achieve at least a 25% EBITDA margin. So we've set our targets and look forward to once again achieving them and beating them.
Returning to North America, these pictures might help us visualize, understand where we're at and where we're going. So in the United States, the pack shot on the left-hand side is of our Duo Alt product, which is what's being presented to the FDA for approval as a high-level disinfectant. And the image on the left-hand side is an ultrasound console, of which there are hundreds of thousands all around the world, and probably at least half of those are in the United States. The instrument that's colored pink is the cord attaching to the probe at the far right-hand side. And it's the probe that goes inside the body. And because it goes inside the body through one of those two orifices, which you can guess at, it becomes a semi-critical medical device, and it needs high-level disinfection. That's accepted universally, that level of disinfection is required. Whether it's performed or not is in large part determined by whether there's a product that's a high-level disinfectant that is to hand, is affordable and available. I'm not sure, I wouldn't suggest for one moment that all intracavity probes that are used vaginally or rectally around the world, day in and day out, are disinfected properly. Quite the opposite, they're not. But where there is an appropriate product that is affordable, is available, then the infection prevention community worldwide recognizes that it should be high-level disinfected. And that's our opportunity, because we're affordable, we're mobile, we're transportable, we don't require power, we don't require servicing, and we're consumable only, we don't require capital investment. So we can be used ubiquitously because of the ease with which we can be used. So the console will attach to intracavity probes, and it will also have on it attachments to skin surface probes. So the middle picture is of the same pack. We identify the pack as Duo, but this is approved by the EPA with a lesser claim set, albeit that it's got the same chemistry within it. So it defines itself as an intermediate level disinfectant, which makes it appropriate for skin surface probes. And the probe that's in the nurse's gloved hand, covered with foam, is a skin surface probe. So on the console, there would be skin surface probes and there would be intracavity probes. And the way that the regulatory framework in the United States works, it sort of presents the sonographer with a choice of having to use a high-level disinfectant on the intracavity probes and can use a cheaper, probably, intermediate level disinfectant on the skin surface probes. But they're all there attached to the station that he or she is working at. Where we are launching into right now is the opportunity to do the skin surface probes. When we have FDA approval, we will be able to do the skin surface probes and the intracavity probes. So it's a fantastic opportunity to either present two products with different regulatory statuses to the sonographer, or potentially find a price that clears both needs and one product that is approved by the FDA that will do both tasks. So it's going to be a question of sensible, careful, considered pricing, but we could really be the ideal choice for the hundreds of millions, literally hundreds of millions of ultrasound procedures that are undertaken in the United States every year. But finally, on the right-hand side, exactly the same pack again, same content, but with a different use pattern, and that is for the disinfection of ophthalmic devices. And the small instrument shown is what's called a tonometer that comes into contact with the cornea. If you have your intraocular pressures read, and they put the little lens against your eyeball, that's what a tonometer is doing. And because it comes into contact with the cornea, it requires high-level disinfection. And that's the product we have approval from Canada Health and is now to be sold by our partner in Canada in a month.
Okay, so we have a slide here regarding ESG. Interestingly, in the last 3 or 4 months, I've been contacted by 4 or 5 of our institutional investors asking us what our ESG targets are, what it is that we're doing about ESG, and where, because we are placed in their ethical funds, in their Better World funds. So it's becoming more of an important topic for us in terms of our relationship with our investors. So what we have done is engaged an ESG specialist consultant who will assist us in developing a formal strategy that we can publish and then make public, which will help us in terms of setting a target by which time we will become carbon zero. We have already been calculating our carbon emissions, but now we will step up our activity internally, and our specialist consultant called Simply Sustainable will help us in that journey. Notwithstanding that, we do have naturally within our product range an environmental impacting product in the cash range, which is where we're taking head-to-head our products with pre-wetted plastic wipes, pre-packed, pre-wetted plastic wipes. So regardless of ESG and our investors' view of the subject matter, we are doing what we can do to reduce the burden, the environmental burden upon hospitals with that product. And so that will be a key part of our drive by developing that, further developing that product and rolling it out in terms of our environmental profile. And of course, we continue to focus ourselves on local community connections, ensuring our staff are looked after, supported, and that their well-being is taken very seriously.
So in summary, the worst impact or the worst effects of COVID and Brexit behind us, growth has resumed. We will continue to grow our global footprint. North America was our challenge 5 years ago. We've risen to it, and we're there now. We have a very profitable still, cash generative business with a great balance sheet, cash free, £9 million of cash on the balance sheet. And our response to these disruptions of the past couple of years, which was to rationalise the business, it's all done behind us once again. So in the interims, we'll be reporting against the interims numbers of last year. At the year end next year, we will be reporting against these numbers clearly. I think the whole picture will become clearer as we proceed over the course of the next 6 months. And what we are is very simple, very focused business, and we have a global opportunity ahead of us. So thank you for being so patient to listen to us for the last half an hour. And I think we start with patients within patients. Hospitals on the mind.
That's great. That's great, Paul. Thank you very much indeed, and to Liz for updating investors this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of the screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted already today, and before addressing some of those questions that we may have from investors in the room, I'd just like to remind you that the recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. If I may, Leanne, if I could just hand back to you, and if I could ask you to moderate those questions from those in the room and those that have come in online, and then I'll pick up from you at the end.
Absolutely, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so if someone wants to put up the hand, if you'd like to obviously project your voice, then it can get picked up on the mic, or I can repeat your question.
Let's start in the middle on the left.
Paul, Liz, could one of you give us a few minutes on exchange rate effects, both in terms of what's recently happened and going forwards?
Liz?
Yeah, so in the year we're reporting, there was very little in terms of effect on the numbers from movement in exchange rates. The rates that by which we translate our overseas operations to the UK, excuse me, are a 12-month average. So very little impact really for of the movements that we've seen at the latter end of the financial year, but we are seeing the impact in the current financial year, and they are positive because we are translating overseas currencies to the sterling. So far they're positive, and we're not seeing any huge swing in terms of componentry purchased from overseas. We are well stocked in terms of that componentry that we would buy, for example, from the US or from Europe. So far, no negatives in our business.
Are we using the forward markets at all?
No, we don't.
No, we don't. Yes,
we don't.
exactly.
Policy issue question.
Yeah.
So how much of that first quarter, 20%, would you ascribe to currency movement?
I I think in percentage terms fairly small. I know that we had a £46,000 FX gain in September. I think in August and July it was much less. So, it's not really impacting us, but we're going to be a winner over the course of the year, I would say.
For your EPA approved product launch in North America, can you explain if you are going through a sort of state by state build up or a big bang? And just a little bit about your partner for North America, a commercial relationship, and whether they're manufacturing for you.
So we started the state by state registrations about 9 months ago. We've got 45 of, or no, correct me, because I was getting my numbers states wrong, but I think we've got 46 out of 52.
Oops.
What?
Have I got that wrong? Well, 50 states, I suppose, and two dependencies.
Oh, okay. We're nearly there. We're waiting on California and another couple of stragglers, but we're pretty much there. Which coincided nicely with these 3 conferences being booked by Parker, the Tailwinds Parker. Parker Laboratories is a family-owned business based in New Jersey, and it is the market leader in the United States, in fact worldwide, in the manufacture and sale of the conductive gels that are used with every ultrasound procedure. So the president and major shareholder is a chap called Neil Brookhart, and it was his father who invented these gels, because in the very early days of ultrasound, they used to put the patient in a bath of water because the water acts as a transmissible wall, sort of barrier or whatever. And then he devised these gels that are used that can be put onto the tip of the ultrasound probe or transducer, and they're market leader in that business. But what that means is that wherever an ultrasound procedure takes place, whether it's intracavity, or whether it's on the tummy or the shoulder, in sports rehab or pregnancy or whatever it may be, the gel's used. Every single ultrasound procedure requires the use of gel because it enhances the image. So where ultrasound takes place, Parker is going to be hanging around that. And so they make for us an ideal partner because our ultrasound disinfectant is used every time the probe is used in between patients. So it's used on one patient, it has to be disinfected before use on a second. So I think the profile of Parker was identified by us early on as a perfect match. As things have evolved, they are a perfect match. There's a meeting of minds when it comes to business approach. We are so thankful that it's owned by an individual, a family, and not a corporate partner. We've had a couple of experiences with some of the big corporations in the United States and elsewhere. You get people shifting in the head of the division one day and then they move on another, and you just don't get any continuity in terms of relationship. But so far, I have to say our relationship with Parker is really, really sound. Now, just to finish on that point, so they manufacture and they sell through distributors in the United States. So they have a well-established network of distributors, established over many years, and our product is going through their network. And where we will be working closely with them is to make sure that the sales, infection prevention sales team of, say, Henry Schein, which is one of the larger distributors in the United States, understands our products, can speak compellingly about the virtues of chloride dioxide and TRISTEL, and has all that scientific knowledge and backup and support. And we will be channeling our domain knowledge through to those sales teams working for distributors. And that's what we see as our principal role in the future success of TRISTEL in the United States.
Right. And once you gain the individual state registrations, is it pretty much a launch immediately on that because they have the network in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we would do with Schein, for example, Parker would say, you can have the product, stop the product through all of your operations in all of the states, apart from those in the states in which we don't have approval, and give us a letter to say that you won't let product cross about the state borderline from one state where we have approval to those few that we don't. And we rely upon them to manage that. But we're nearly there. Maynard.
On the non-core products, you reported them as discontinued operations at the half-year stage and restated some of their numbers. And then for these results, they're lumped in with everything else again. So why did you change your mind since February?
Because we believed in February that we were reporting a discontinued operation, which the accounting policy around it, we thought we satisfied, which was that there's inputs, outputs, there was a whole division, if you like, that we were ceasing, but our auditors have told us they view it differently, and so it's not appropriate. It's a pure accounting decision by KPMG, which I'm actually really disappointed about, because I thought it was really simple and straightforward to look at, to restate that. Now it's
difficult for us to.
I completely agree. I completely agree. So it was a huge blow. We were very disappointed to not be able to demonstrate it in that way. But what it is clear, I think it's important to reiterate, is that the revenue in the period of discontinued products of 1.5 million did not have any profit contribution, and it ceased at the end of 31st of December. So nothing happened with those discontinued products post, in terms of revenue, post 31st of December. There were some continued wrap-up costs, so we had stock write-offs and we had some redundancies and things like that, which did follow in the second half. But all product sales ended at that point.
You mentioned on FDA approval the third high-level disinfectant approved. Are the other two already approved for use in the market you're aiming at? And if so, how do you compete against them?
I know one of them is. That's the product that we always refer to in the ultrasound space, and it's a product called Trophon. That is designed to accommodate ultrasound probes. It's a box in which a different chemistry to ours. It's called hydrogen peroxide. It's like ours, an oxidizing agent and a very high performance disinfectant is injected in a mist form, and then it's controlled within the box so that it doesn't escape into the general atmosphere. It comes into contact with the probe, which is suspended within the box. And that got an FDA approval as a high-level disinfectant process some 10 years ago. And Trophon, which is a product manufactured by an Australian company called Nanosonic, has been very successful in the United States. Now we compete with, sorry, a bit louder.
Yeah, please.
So we compete with Trophon all around the world, including in Australia, their home market, and we do very, very well against them. It's a keen rivalry, and I'd say that the benefits, the features of our product weigh heavily in our favour in the competitive situation against Trophon. So we know what our battleground is going to look like with an FDA approval. We will be competing in many respects with Trophon. Now, Trophon's not used by all hospitals throughout North America, and there's good reason for that, and that is because not everybody wants to have a Trophon. So what are all the other hospitals doing with their ultrasound equipment? Well, they'll be using something less than a high-level disinfectant and kind of making do. And to return to an answer or something I maybe said earlier, making do is what you do if all you can do is make do. But if you've got an affordable, deployable, easy to use and understandable high-level disinfectant that can be reached out and used in the sonographer's room, then that's what will be adopted. So we just have to go and find those opportunities and go through the persuasion and conversion process to win that part of the market that's not owned by Trophon. But of course, we'll also compete with Trophon. Machines break down, machines age and have to be replaced. And there's plenty of churn in the ultrasound markets in which we operate in worldwide, where we're taking some business away from Trophon, and other situations in which Trophon takes some business away from us, because the hospital wants to have a machine rather than rely upon a nurse to actually perform the high-level disinfection process. So what's good there is we know what the opportunity is and where to go looking for it. So if that answers the question, that's principally what the battleground is going to look like in the United States. And it's one we're pretty familiar with, because it's the same battleground that we have marched across, and they've marched across, and we've marched across in all other countries in which we compete with them.
And how generally do you price compared to the competitor?
As a rule of thumb, they're capital and consumable. The consumable is a high-level disinfectant in a small dose, so we would price to their consumable piece.
You use the term the likelihood of success unchallenged. Can you give us an actual probability number on the likelihood of failure?
It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because that is the big headwind, or potentially the big headwind. It's the catastrophic headwind. And what is the probability of catastrophe?
Okay. I think that we will succeed, but I'd like to ask you a question. Why do you think it's catastrophic?
Well, I think the markets would, if they've been waiting 5 years for something big to happen in the United States, and they've been patiently waiting, digesting the 500,000 per annum of investment there, that if it doesn't come to something, and I'm talking about the high-level disinfectant, then I think that one's holding of shares would be marked down quite dramatically on the day. Don't you think?
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I should be careful where I stray into this territory, but there is an underlying business that when we resume, and let's presume that we resume the growth trajectory and the profitability that we achieve for how many years was it? 12 years. Then there's a valuation of the company based upon that underlying business that's successful, growing with a huge global opportunities still to grow into. And FDA approval or not, we cannot be denied or have withdrawn from us the opportunity to penetrate the ultrasound market with the eBay approved product. So it's a question neither of us can answer. As I stand here now.
No, but you have answered it. You have estimated the likelihood of success.
I have.
You have estimated it. I mean, what is that then? We'll reverse it. Then tell me about the failure rate. What is the success rate you're anticipating in your projections?
I think we're going to, well, first, two things. I think we'll get an approval. That's binary. That's 100%.
Okay.
I think.
It's bold stuff.
Well, I do.
We wouldn't be doing it unless we thought we
I
were
very reason
going
to
to
believe that
succeed.
we will.
I know, so de novo is slightly different, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a little bit of to and fro that's possible.
There is some to and fro, that's right, and I think that is being played out at the moment because we're in active discussion, indeed negotiation with the FDA. There's still the additional testing that we need. They have a principle which is least burdensome approach, so they can't ask us to do things that sort of make no sense. Now, we can only exercise so much control over the agency and good sense and discussion between us. But there are guidelines. They can't ask us to go and embark upon a testing program that would take another 2 years when we've got 180 days clock ticking to finish. So that's one of the sort of guiding principles that we will operate under. All of those things will make me think that we will succeed.
Just on the American hospitals, you said they're making do. Why aren't there, we've never talked about the rate of infections in the American hospitals, how many people get infected because the hospitals are making do with low level disinfectants.
There's plenty of data around infection rates, post-procedural infection rates in endoscopy, ultrasound.
So how many people in the States then get infected? effectively?
Oh, I wouldn't have that number, but it'll be a lot, as it is in the countries. And published papers, surveys. There's a massive published information about post-procedural infection rates across a whole range of instrumentation that we're involved with.
Just on the FDA approval process, once you send in the next additional information, is that it then? The FDA will either give you a yes or a no, or will they can they request even more information?
No, we believe they won't request any more information, but they will then have about 3 months, given their timetable, to review and digest all of the information that we provide. So it'll be a lot more information, but they'll have to work through it.
Then it'll be a yes or a no answer based on what you've.
That's our understanding. Yeah. So that bit's binary as well.
And I'm sure that one of the principal focus is the fact that it's effective, before they approve it. But the other one must be, whether there's potential collateral damage to the user and all of that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've solved those problems in every other country. So.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And all of that's been, all of those issues, toxicology, biocompatibility, impact upon the instruments themselves. We have to make an economic case that it's a product that's worth them approving because of the benefits for healthcare and for the patient population. So all of those things are within the submission. There's a lot of data.
Last question.
I'll just add one quick thing, Michael, that we have to remember that the Duo product that is going through the FDA program has not been designed for the United States. That product is currently sold around the world. It accounts for 20% of our medical device revenue, but it accounts for half of the procedures that take place using a TRISTEL product. So it's a well-proven product. And so that's one of the reasons that we feel so confident about getting through the FDA process, is that it's not a new invention. We're not placing it. This isn't the first time anyone's looked at it, reviewed it, considered it appropriate for the function that we're selling it for. It's being used so widely.
Can you give us some idea of what additional data you've been asked to do? Where were the areas that the FDA needed some further?
Well, I'll give you one example. In terms of micro testing, there are 3 sort of categories of micro testing that you have to do. One is, they call it potency testing. So sort of testing in test tubes inside a laboratory, where inside the test tube there's a particular microorganism, and you add your disinfectant to the test tube. And then after a period of time, which is your contact time, you neutralize it, and then you see whether any organisms have survived contact with the disinfectant. We passed that, and that's a stage gate. You don't get through that. And it was 5 years ago that you don't go on. And we got through it, and we went on. And the next massive body of work is that you have to prove in your submission that when the disinfectant, in our case of chlorine dioxide, is applied to the surface of a medical device that it's intended for, that when you wipe that device with a chlorine dioxide chemistry and you do recovery, so you swab it, use some method to see whether any microbes left on it, they've all disappeared. And for that, you have to show to the FDA that you've got as many instruments as would be representative of the ultrasound market. So we had to locate, find, buy Begstoro steel probes from GE and probes from Siemens and probes from Toshiba. And it was a huge amount of work. And each one of them had to be tested into the submission. That took several years. And then the final stage, or the final category, is you need to go into a clinic where the clinic is using probes on patients, and as they come out of the patient, they're handed to a nurse or disinfection technician, and they use your product in a sort of live setting, and then the swabbing and the recovery takes place. So 3 categories. It took 5 years. The shelf life of our product is 2 years. So they ideally want want you to use the same batch of product across all three categories of testing. We couldn't, because what was used in the potency testing in 2015 and 16 was out of date, and so rendered you can't work with it. So you can see some of the practical difficulties that we've encountered. But they have rules and guidelines, and so the guideline says that it should be the same batch that's used across all three tiers, three-tier approach. So a bit of negotiation, and we believe that we'll go back as far as we can with batches that we still have in storage and use that on at least two of those categories. That's a good example. Now, we've got to get it done. We've passed those tests in the past. We've got to get the product out to the United States. We've got to make sure we get lab time. So there are lots of logistical sort of arrangements and everything else. There's no reason why we won't repeat the successes we have had from a science perspective, that we achieved in the past. And we did it multiple times.
Given the time, we're approaching the hour, we're just going to take a couple of questions from online, if that's okay. So you've already talked about competitors in the ultrasound market with Trophon, but are there any signs of emerging competitors using chlorine dioxide?
The answer to that is unequivocally no.
Okay, brilliant. Can you expand on your overseas expansion plans? North America, Europe, and Singapore seem to be going well. And how many staff do you have outside the UK, and how do you see this number growing?
So we have a footprint that involves some 30 distributors and 14 subsidiaries that cover, I think I said earlier, more than 14 countries. So Berlin covers Austria, Poland, and Switzerland. So there'll be 4 countries that we call, it's a German subsidiary. So in total, we've got a footprint that is about 50 countries. We now are in the United States, but we have new distributors that have either been appointed, but we're just mobilizing them, or we're about to appoint in Vietnam, in the Philippines, a second distributor in India, because India's not really kicked off. There are a lot of countries in which we still have to establish a presence. So I think that answers one part of the question.
Yeah.
And the other part was?
The other part was about number of staff outside the UK.
I'll defer to my colleagues.
So we have 220 staff worldwide, of which 110 are based in the UK. But the majority of staff overseas are sales staff. So all of our overseas offices are basically, they carry out distributor functions. So they are importing and selling product. There's no or very little manufacturing outside of the UK.
Brilliant. And one more. What is the anticipated gross margin of US sales given the partnership with Parker if FDA approval is achieved?
100%.
Because it's a royalty basis. So we take a percentage of the sales value that is earned by Parker manufacturing and then selling through their distribution network, and that percentage comes to us as a royalty. So it would be included in our revenue number, but there's effectively goes straight to the bottom line. Maynard.
Last question.
Vying for the last question.
This last on cash.
Yeah.
At the open day, we had 2 employees there, really bullish on the product. They said it's only a matter of time when it's going to sell really big in the NHS. And look at your results today, and sales are down from 4 to 3, gross margin of 59%, which is just a bit bigger than your non-core products. So does it really have a big future?
It does have a big future. You're absolutely right. The year is an anomaly. Sales have fallen in the UK, and I think that's because of the mix of products within there. The new products that we are launching, the capsules and the tank, they're not fully launched yet. They're not available and legal to sell, because we've been advised by our hospital market that they need to have the UK CA mark applied to them. If you have a look in the chairman's statement, you'll read a piece there about the regulatory environment that we're working in. So that's another hurdle for us to jump, which is to attain regulatory approvals for those products under as medical devices, even though they are surface disinfectants. So that's a piece of work that we're working through, and the gross margin has fallen as a consequence of sampling and giveaways in order to get the product moving in those hospitals where we're launching.
But Maynard, you're going to take a long-term view.
Yeah.
We have a big ambition. It's not going to happen in anything other than many years.
You have been talking about hot shots and
Absolutely.
a few years ago.
Yeah.
This is a few years ago.
Absolutely.
And product development takes time, though. It does.
It seems as a second, not as good as the wipes and foams. They seem to just take it off.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? The cash part is not really.
Well, I think if you backtrack, we first sold wipes in 2003. Yeah. So those early years, there was,
When the business had revenues of 3 million in the Republic. So I think, things we're long-term and strategic, and I think we just have to not expect from year to year enormous, dramatic progress.
Paul, if I may just jump in, as Leanne said, we have gone through the hour. Obviously, thank you to everybody online and to those in the room for your questions. And of course, Paul, Liz, we'll make any questions that we haven't got through today's presentation available to you from those online after the meeting has closed. I know investor feedback will be particularly important to you both, and I'll shortly redirect investors on the call to give you their thoughts and expectations. But I wondered, before doing so, if I may, Paul, just ask you for a few closing comments, and then I'll wrap up and conclude today's meeting.
Well, many thanks to yourself for hosting this. Many thanks to all of you who are here and those that have joined remotely. We feel very positive about the prospects for the business. We know that the disruptions of the last 3 years are behind us. I really look forward to being able to stand up in front of you and speak without having to continuously refer back to the past 3 years, and look forward to that next year. Thank you.
That's great. Paul, Liz, thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Can I please ask investors on this call not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of TRISTEL PLC, I'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. May I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon.